We gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll the union on. We gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll the union on. If the plan is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him, gonna roll it over him, gonna roll it over him. If the plan is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him, gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. If the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. If the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. If the merchant's in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. If the merchant's in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. If the banker's in the way, we're gonna roll it over them. Gonna roll it over them. Gonna roll it over them. If the banker's in the way, we're gonna roll it over them. Roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. If Pete is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. If the Pete is in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll. We're gonna roll the union on. If the future's in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll it over him. Gonna future's in the way, we're gonna roll it over him. Gonna roll the union on. There is me.
Hello, and welcome, comrades and friends, to Workers' World Party's live stream, where hundreds of revolutionaries from across the world gather to strategize, to analyze, and to build the struggle for a socialist future, a workers' world. My name is Marie Kelly, and I am a member of the labor fraction of Workers' World Party hosting tonight. Across the country, in a broad spectrum of workplaces, there are examples of how organized labor is fighting for higher pay, safer working conditions, protection from unfair labor practices, and against corporate greed, exploitation, and oppression. Tonight, we will hear about current labor struggles and victories. We will also hear how to grow class solidarity and defeat capitalism's stranglehold on the working class and build a global class-wide movement. If you could take a second to go to Workers' World Party's Facebook page and share this live video with your friends and in your Facebook groups and pages, that would help us enormously to reach more members of our class. Also, we encourage you to share your comments at Workers' World on Twitter. We are also live on YouTube tonight. Please make sure to share the live stream video on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can post on social media. We have a strong lineup of speakers tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to get started. Our first speaker, Minnie Bruce Pratt, was born in 1946 in Selma, Alabama, and raised in her hometown of Centerville, where she still lives part of the year. Active in women's liberation since 1975, she came out as a lesbian that year in the Army-based town of Fayetteville, North Carolina. and lost custody of her 2 young children on the basis of the, quote, crime against nature statute. A poet, an essayist, she co-wrote in 1984, Yours in Struggle, 3 feminist perspectives on anti-Semitism and racism, along with Ellie Bolkin and Barbara Smith, a member of the Combahee River Collective. Pratt is a member of Workers' World Party's labor fraction also, and a managing editor of Workers' World newspaper. Minnie Bruce, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Can you report on the labor struggles happening in your home state of Alabama?
Yes, I'm really delighted to be here this evening with so many wonderful organizers and activists in the workers' struggle. I just got back from Alabama, where I live part of the time, as Marie said, and I want to give you just a little bit of background before I talk specifically about a couple of struggles that are going on there now. The context for working class organizing in Alabama goes all the way back to, of course, before the Civil War, but specifically after the end of the Civil War and after the end of slavery. Big landowners and big industrial interests tried to keep the freed people of African descent enslaved and unable to sell their labor as workers. Their methods included white supremacist legislation and vigilantism, and pitting Black and white workers against each other using all methods possible, including so-called least convict prisoner labor. I'm telling you this because these methods continue today, similarly and newly invented methods. It is the most important thing to know about organizing in Alabama, that closing that gap that has been put in place by the ruling class is the most important thing in building labor solidarity. In addition to the uprising movements and revolutionary work against injustice by the Alabama indigenous, Black, and Latinx peoples, there has been strong anti-racist labor organizing in Alabama since the 1880s, when the Knights of Labor organized workers regardless of skill, race, nationality, or gender. And that radical independent unionism has continued in different forms into the 20th century. For instance, in the 1930s and 40s, with the International Union of Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers, known as Mine Mill, that had ties to a very strong Alabama Communist Party of many thousands that most people don't know anything about. Now we're in the 21st century, and the Brookwood, Alabama coal miners have been on strike for 6 months. These are locals of the United Mine Workers. They've been organized in central Alabama, where I'm from, since the early 20th century. One of the members of those locals, Dennis Mobley, was one of the 13 men who died in the conflagration in the Brookwood mines earlier in the 2000s, and he was a classmate of mine at Bibb County High School. The locals in the Brookwood coal miners have the largest percentage of Black miners in the UMWA in the country, about 60%. About 40%. The strikers' t-shirts, as you saw in those pictures, say, "We are one," and they are united in striking to defy global steel coal producer Warrior Met and its largest shareholder, global mega hedge fund BlackRock. The miners are trying to regain concessions they made to save the company from bankruptcy in 2016. These concessions amounted altogether to about $1.1 billion in wages and benefits. The company promised to restore them. Of course, they have not done so. The Brookwood miners are striking to regain health benefits, wages, and safety safeguards. The Brookwood mines are among the deepest in the world, over a mile deep. And the miners are sometimes down there 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, doing exceedingly dangerous work. The terms of the old contract were affordable to the company when coal was at $150 a ton. It is now at $460 a ton. the company is refusing to meet to repay those concessions that the miners gave up. The miners are on 13 picket lines, 7 days a week, and they're supported by a very astute and politically aware spouse auxiliary that walks with them and organized a strike pantry to supply food and other really essential things like formula and diapers and so forth. If you want to contribute to the strike pantry, I put that in the chat to everyone. The miners have traveled to New York City twice to protest BlackRock on Wall Street. You saw that picture in the slideshow. They're planning actions with workers at the port of Mobile, which is the shipping point for their coal. Their coal is highly sought for world steel production, low in sulfur and a premium coal. The point of vulnerability is at the shipping point in Mobile, and they're strategizing around that. Larry Spencer, who is the District 20 representative, says of the miners, they're on the line fighting for their jobs and for everybody's jobs. To keep going during the strike, some miners have gone to work at the Bessemer Amazon warehouse because they're on strike pay, which is less than half of what they've been earning. And I know at least one, if not more, are talking union there at the Bessemer Amazon warehouse, which is the site of the historic 2020 Amazon organizing drive by the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union. It was led by the majority Black and almost half female workforce, and the connections between the Black freedom struggles and previous union battles were strong during that campaign. Though the vote was lost, the struggle continues. The union filed an NLRB appeal. The hearing officer recommended a ruling in favor of the union to order a new election. The final ruling is still awaited. In the meantime, Stuart Applebaum, who is the RWDSU president, says that Amazon has resumed anti-union messaging to the employees of the Bessemer warehouse. They played as dirty as they could and to defeat the union the last time around. They're starting it up again. He also noted that the Union Organizing Committee of Workers is bigger now than it was last year. He says, we never went away. The organizing has accelerated. It's not about our union. It's about the entire labor movement and indeed the entire international labor movement, because Alabama's economy is now highly industrialized and globalized, with automobile production, space rocket construction, shipbuilding, steel mills, electronic manufacturing, timber and lumber for export, logistics like Amazon for distribution. And the health workers are on the move as well. Just while I was there, the Birmingham nurses on the night shift at UAB Hospital, the largest hospital and the largest private employer in the state, refused to clock into their night shift with the support of the day shift in the beginning of a campaign for an increase in wages and safety on the job as the COVID epidemic hits Alabama particularly hard. There are more struggles. Those are the highlights. Thanks for letting me tell you about them.
Thank you, Minnie Bruce. Our next speaker is Donna Marks, coming to us from Portland, Oregon. Donna is the face of the Nabisco strike. She has worked at Nabisco for 17 years and worked at the Wonder Bread and Fran's companies before that. Donna has been a union member for 30 years in the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, Local 364. She is a shop steward and trustee on the union's executive board. Donna has worked in every department at the plant, but is now in the environmental health services, where she plans on working until retiring. The workers in EHS keep the plant clean, safe, and in shape to pass inspection. Nabisco was known in the community for the beautiful landscaping done by the EHS, but as one small example of the negative impact a large corporation has on the community, when Mondelez took over the Nabisco plant, the EHS department was downsized, and to save money, with a lack of regard for the community, Mondelez gave up the rights to the well water, so the landscape has been suffering. Donna, congratulations for your successful organizing at Nabisco. Your labor fight spread to other Nabisco plants across the country, and your efforts gained attention and support through the Boycott Nabisco social media campaign. I'd love to hear your firsthand account of the strike and how workers are feeling about the settlement.
Thank you for having me. You know, for me, I'm overwhelmed. I'm excited. I feel that we won, but you know, we have some members who, you know, especially in Portland, we're a little more diehard here, who are willing to fight longer to get to not give them anything. But at the end of the day, we got everything we asked for, and I believe that's a win. And the win for most of us was seeing the impact we had on the other unions in Portland, Oregon, and the other unions in other countries. Cadbury in Australia went on strike. Mondelez owns them, and they were encouraged by our strike. We were only on the line for 40 days. Nothing like the steelworkers or the nurses. But it was the mistake the company made by corporate greed is allowing us to come together to have one cause, which is to fight corporate greed. And it made us stronger, and it made us powerful. It brought other unions in. We have the nurses in Portland. I just spoke at a rally for the Kaiser nurses. They're about to go on strike. And the lesson that was learned from all of this for all of us is we're stronger together, all unions, not just individual, but when we come together as one. And I think that's a lesson that we have forgotten about. And we were fighting these individual battles on our own, feeling alone, and not realizing that we're all going through the same thing, which is corporate greed and having a place in America, which is, you know, do what I say or you're going to lose your job. And the company not wanting us to know the power we have, that we actually, if we speak loud enough and get other people involved, we have the power to get what we deserve and not lose what we already bargained for. So that's what the strike brought to the awareness for a lot of us in Portland, Oregon. We're back to work now, and we're all kind of walking on eggshells because we're not quite sure if retaliation is going to happen, because we won. And we won big, and we hit them hard. And, you know, the best place to hit anyone who is greedy is in their pockets. You hit them financially, and the boycott caused that to happen. And we emptied the shelves. We stopped trains. We were powerful in Portland. The unions came together, and, you know, we didn't literally stop the trains. The union just worked with us, the Union Pacific, and they wouldn't cross our picket line. And, you know, the company had to rent out I think a mile worth of track, lease it. So they spent a lot of money to try to make products that they couldn't make. And in the end, we won. We came back, and we're strong, and we know we'll probably have to do this another 4 years, but I'm okay. I'm ready for the ride. The fight is still in me. I'm walking with the nurses in Portland, Oregon now. And, you know, UPS is going to be coming up soon. I'm with them. We just got to stick together to make the unions be what they used to be. And this is the time for it to happen. We're doing it right now. As I was watching the intro to this podcast, this webinar, I was touched looking at all the unions and looking how big we are. We are, you know, as I believe it was Minnie said earlier, it's not about race. It's not about Black, white, Asian. It's about the working class, and to be on that line and not see color, just to see my brothers and sisters standing side by side, fighting for the same thing. That's what's happening in America right now. And I tell corporate America, they better wake up and pay attention, because we're here to fight. So that's it. Thank you.
Solidarity, Donna. Thank you for that
Solidarity.
inspirational talk. Thank you. Our next speaker is Renee Imperato. Renee was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen and has been a member of Workers' World Party for 50 years. She is the chairperson of SAGE, advocating and providing services to LGBTQ elders. Renee is also the co-creator and facilitator for the Transgenerational Theater Project. Welcome, Renee. I'm anxious to hear how sex workers are coping and organizing during this COVID pandemic.
Hi. Yes, thanks for that. If I could preface my remarks to just talk about the working class, which of course sex workers very much are. I should have advised you that my pronouns are she and her. And also that TGTP is the Transgenerational Theater Project. I'm sorry for that omission. That's on me. So a couple of days ago, I was talking with someone, a very actually nice person, but it's just how we are conditioned to divide ourselves into categories that we really are not separate from. And so I was talking to this worker, and they were open-minded, but they needed to be nudged a little. And they said, well, the difference between you and me is, that, you sell your body. And I said, you mean in the performance of my job? And they said, well, that's correct. And I said, and what is your job? I'm a bus driver. And I said, and you do not sell your body in the performance of your job? So I just kind of had that come to my mind as I was waiting to come on. I'm not going to get too technical, and I'm trying to watch the clock. I think I have a 7-minute or maybe 6-minute limit right now. So I'll do a little history of not too far back, but let's just say before social media. If we went back, like, say, 30 years, most of the work was done by ads in certain papers or in the street. While it did have, risks in a different way, in some ways the same way, we have gone now to another era, which is, of course, the technical era. And in regards to that, let me say that until Trump came in, we did not have these laws, as you may know, two of the main ones being Cesar and Foster, or the Cloud Act, all of which are erroneously painted and almost sort of linking trafficking, which frankly has nothing to do with us. But because of the reactionary movement, I might add, by the way, that when Cesar and Foster was passed in April of 17, only one politician in Washington voted against it, one Democrat. Just to show not how much they make of the two main parties being different, but how they are in many ways the same. When Sessa became law, it severely limited the way sex workers make their livelihood. Sites were shut down. Felonies were created. And in fact, it forced many sex workers to seek some methods of work that were more unsafe. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but just to say there are many platforms, some run by sex workers, that do things to certain check people's background, stuff like that. Thankfully, some of them do still exist. Many sites have been shut down. And so what that has done is severely affect the income of the workers. Then when you follow it up with the COVID and all that comes with it, which is the economic downturn that people had to participate in this industry, was drastically affected. And frankly, I can tell you this. I know people who, had a fairly nice apartment, living, well, and are now homeless. And this has especially hit workers of color. And the danger even more to the workers of color. Now, for instance, what has happened is that people now take risks that they might not have been taking before, because when you had all these sites up and they were, legal, you could use them as means to secure a certain sense of safety. And that has been greatly diminished. Last month, I was at a conference of people who work in sex and kink. And I can tell you, most of it was like workshops, like going to school. And one of them was, of course, on legality. Interesting enough, as long as I'm on, I might also add that something I actually did not know until last month. The state that has the least oppressive laws against sex workers is one, and that is actually New York. And of course, it varies from state to state. But needless to say this, many sex workers also, it's a second job. It could be primary, but you have, I'm going to tell you right now, taxi drivers, office workers, people who might consider themselves actors or models, also might do that as a side gig. So what the crisis that's facing our industry now, in which we still exist, is we have to seek the most creative means to obtain our income. And of course, I also might add that as a trans woman myself, I also represent many people in my corner of the community. I'm just afraid that it's already 7 minutes. I can stay on longer for people who could have questions, but the point is, workers of the world unite is all workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Our next speaker to join us, we are fortunate to have Chris Smalls. he is a former supervisor at the Amazon warehouse in Staten Island and has been described by knew I would mess that up, Jacobin magazine as Jeff Bezos's worst enemy. Chris founded the Amazon Labor Union to protect workers from Amazon's exploitative business practices and wrongful terminations. Chris, if you have a minute to join us just to say hello. I know you're on the site working hard to organize the Staten Island warehouse. How's the organizing campaign going? And is there anything that viewers should know to support this important effort? And Chris, if you could, can you unmute? And
hey, can
hey,
y'all hear
Chris.
me?
Yes,
Hey.
yeah, we can hear you. Thank you so much for getting on. I know that you're actively organizing as we speak.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, everybody. I can't stay that long. I am on 36 hours straight being outside of Amazon. So I've been out here since yesterday, and I'm exhausted. But we're at the tail end of our union campaign as far as the election. Just to give you guys an update, we are within weeks, literally within weeks of filing for a union election in Staten Island. So first and foremost, I want to thank my comrades from WAR NYC who has been joining us on the ground for multiple of our barbecue events. Also partnering up with you guys at these rallies in New York City, involving the community. It's been very helpful. It's been very inspiring to these workers, especially those who experienced that for the first time. And I'm happy to say, 5 months later, since we started, that we're within arm's reach of making history. And this is our fourth quarter right now. The game is on the line. Amazon doesn't play fair. And I think we all know that. We've seen what they did in Alabama. And we know what to expect here in Staten Island. Literally, they called the cops on us just last night again. But that effort has failed as well. The cops really don't care because the cops are unionized, and they know what we've been doing for the last 5 months. So it's just to give you some shed light on what Amazon is going to do once we file. It's really just the beginning of our fight. Even though we started 5 months ago, to get to an election is a victory by itself. But then the next day, we're literally going to be outside, continuing to build our trust with the workers, because the hard part now is to get 50% of the workforce to vote yes. And we don't want to make that same mistake. We don't want to lose the interest of the workers. We don't want to make sure that the workers are disconnected from the organizing work that we're putting together. Everything that we're doing is worker-led. Everything that we're doing is grassroots. And I think the workers appreciate that a bit more because of the fact that just our presence alone and the dedication that myself and my team have to be out here, rain or shine, day and night, morning, noon, doesn't matter. I think the workers really, they really appreciate it, and it's starting to resonate with them on a larger scale. To sit here now and say that we have almost 2,000 workers signed up for an independent union, it's just amazing, and I'm proud to be a part of this organizing effort. It is my first campaign, my first union drive that I've ever, I guess, invented, so to speak. The fact that we created this together, and I'm hoping that once again, this once we do file, we get the attention that we rightfully deserve. This union campaign has definitely been underreported, underappreciated, in my opinion. And I think that everybody here on this call, I think we all have the due diligence to these workers to stand in solidarity with them. And, you know, the labor movement, I know there's a lot of different industries that are fighting their own battles right now. And my hat goes off to them and the bravery of these workers that are speaking up. I think we saw that spark start in the beginning of the pandemic. And right now, it's just a crucial moment in history for us. I think if we are successful in New York or anywhere in the States, I believe that this will definitely change the culture of the labor movement forever. And right now, once again, I'm just gonna remind everybody that, you know, we are within arm's reach from filing for this election. And once we do, I'm asking everybody to please clear your calendars for the end of the month of October. We're gonna have our press conference to announce that. So I'm going to get back to some of my comrades here on the call. Tony, if you're listening, and Ted, if you're here, I'm going to reach out to you guys. I want people from Philly. I want people from New York and beyond to, you know, make plans to travel to Staten Island at the end of October and join on the ground with these workers. Let's show the world what New York City is about, what New York area is about. And let's show the world that when people power come together, there's no amount of money that can stop that. So we don't care about Jeff Bezos and his $billion penis rocket. We care about these workers on the ground, these workers that are making him rich, and these workers that are in our communities that we come from. So once again, just thank you guys for having me. Please stay in touch. Please reach out to me. Share our GoFundMe link as well, AmazonLaborUnion.org, at Amazon Labor Union on Twitter, at @shut_down Amazon on Twitter as well. Thank you, y'all. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Chris. I and Workers World have been with you from the very beginning, and we're going to be with you the rest of the way. So you can count on us.
Absolutely, and I greatly appreciate y'all. I will see y'all soon, comrades.
Yep. Our next speaker is Kate Murphy. Kate is a registered nurse and the president of Massachusetts Nurses Association. She is also an ICU nurse at Brigham and Women's Hospital and a member of the steering committee for the labor campaign for a single payer. Katie, it's a pleasure to welcome you. As a nurse, I am proud of how RNs are standing up to the corporate greed that undermines our profession. Can you tell us about the St. Vincent nurses strike in Massachusetts and explain why the St. Vincent nurses and so many other nurses across the country are walking the picket line, calling for better staffing and protections for nurses, and how that translates to higher quality of care for patients?
Thank you so much, Marie. You know, there have been some inspiring speakers from my sisters and brother here tonight. And I want to say thank you for having me, and good evening, sisters and brothers across the country. As I said, as Marie said, you know, I'm Katie Murphy. I'm the president of the Massachusetts Nurses Association, and we represent 23,000 nurses and healthcare workers across Massachusetts, from big academic medical centers to visiting nurses associations to school nurses. And, you know, as you know, about a year and a half ago, the pandemic started. And before that, for about another 18 months, the nurses at St. Vincent Hospital in Worcester, Massachusetts had been at the table negotiating for a fair contract. It's a community hospital of about 800 nurses. It was 800 nurses. Worcester is a city about 90 minutes west of Boston in central Massachusetts. It serves a very varied population. There are some very vulnerable members of the community there. Those hospitals there play a critical role. And St. Vincent is, or was, a very highly regarded, important hospital in the Worcester area. So the nurses were at the table for about 18 months. And then when the pandemic struck in March of 2020, the nurses voluntarily paused negotiations. We said we're going to put all our efforts, all our time, everything we've got into taking care of our patients, into keeping people safe. I mean, and you remember that time, we really didn't know what we were dealing with. We had no PPE. The morbidity and the mortality, especially, you know, in the Northeast, in California, were soul crushing. Were soul crushing. People had never seen this level of death and despair and people losing their family members, you know, ever before. The nurses at St. Vincent, in fact, in the recovery room, closed down their recovery room and made it into, they took this upon themselves to turn it into an intensive care unit so that the COVID patients who really needed the critical care beds could go to the regular intensive care unit. So they took that upon themselves. They worked extra shifts. They knew that they didn't have what they needed. Tenet is the for-profit corporation that owns a hospital. I don't know if that grates on your ears as much as it grates on mine to think of profits over patients, but that's really what's happening here. But the nurses did not have the resources they needed to take care of their patients. But nevertheless, they took care of their patients. They, you know, changed the recovery room into an intensive care unit, took care of our patients. And then as the pandemic looked like it was slowing down a little bit last summer, went back to the table. Now, the conditions inside the building before the pandemic were very dangerous. Over 100 nurses had left the hospital before the pandemic. This was long before we had ever heard of COVID-19 or coronavirus. They had left. The reason being the assignments were just plain old too heavy. And this is really why the nurses are out on the street. If you have too many patients, you can't provide safe, high quality care for those patients. It's really as simple as that. And I think the statistics are for every patient you have, and this is on a regular medical surgical floor where we would all go, maybe if we had a mild heart attack, if we had our gallbladder out, right? You know, so nothing crazy. For every patient that a nurse has over 4, the mortality rate and the morbidity rate, which means the you're at risk for injury, increases by 7%. So if you've got 5 patients, 6 patients, 7 patients, those patients are in more danger all the time. Now, Tenet is a Fortune 100 company, not a Fortune 500 company. They're up in that 100 level of billionairehood. So they certainly had the resources in which to provide the nurses with the resources that we needed to take care of our patients. They also didn't have enough secretaries on the units to answer the phone, so that nurses were running in and out of patients' rooms to answer the phone. They didn't have enough transport personnel to move the patients when they needed to go for an imaging study, say to CAT scan or to X-ray. And I think it's very important to remember that these are the local population jobs. This is your local economy. This is the economy of a city. When you facilities often talk about giving back to their community. Well, one way of giving back to your community is to hire the community. So many of these jobs were gone, and it really got to a point where the nurses had negotiated. We had tried everything. We had documented the dangerousness, you know, every single shift by filing, you know, official forms saying to them, we object to these assignments. It is too dangerous. We filed, I think, 1,000 of them in 2020 alone. We met with them. We met with, you know, everybody in the community to try to get some sense into Tenet. And they refused. They refused to supply these basic, the basic safe workplace conditions that we needed in order to keep our patients safe. So on March 8th of this year, 2021, still in the depths of a pandemic, we had no choice but to withhold our labor, and the 700 nurses walked out of St. Vincent Hospital. And that was over 7 months ago. This is the longest nurses strike in Massachusetts history. And this is what we're asking for, is to have enough nurses so that the patient assignments are safe, and so that we can have the resources such as support staff so that we can deliver the care. That's it. That's it. As I said, 100 nurses had already walked out of the hospital. During the pandemic, Tenet received $2.8 billion in federal relief funds, CARES money, for COVID relief, a Fortune 100 company. So they received $2.8 billion. They still refused to settle with the nurses. Early in 2021, they posted their profits for that last quarter of 2020, and it was over $400 million. And they bragged about this, and this was on their website, about what quality they were delivering to their stakeholders. And they talked about how they used the CARES money from the pandemic funds to stabilize their financial position. This is a company that owns hospitals. The nurses, we went to our legislators. We've gone, to the local legislators who are trying to apply pressure. But you know what? We're in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Tenet is based in Dallas. You know what? They really don't care. They really don't care. Our local legislators, our all around the state, all the way up to our Congressman Jim McGovern, who's a good friend to nurses and a good friend to labor. He has tried. Our senators, Senator Markey and Senator Warren, they have pleaded our case also. And the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, is the former mayor of Boston. Again, he's a former union official, and he so of course, he's a union brother. So good to see someone as the Secretary of Labor come from from the ranks. He has tried, and actually I'll talk about how Tenet made sure that we could not get unemployment benefits for over 9 weeks. They just threw every roadblock in the way. And granted, we were on strike, but Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh determined that we were eligible for unemployment benefits. And we finally, some nurses went 9 weeks and even more without a paycheck at all. So certainly Marty Walsh went to bat for us, and at least made sure that after a while, nurses got unemployment insurance. And he also intervened in making sure that we got COBRA. But Tenet also waited until the absolute last minute in order to file the paperwork so that we nurses at St. Vincent could get our COBRA benefits. There were nurses whose family members were ill. Some were receiving chemotherapy. Some were children who needed medication. Tenet did not care. And they have just been the poster child of evil. Really, they really have been. Labor has been with us every step of the way. They have been on our picket line. They have written letters. They have written letters to Tenet and saying, we will be seeking our health care elsewhere, as donated to our strike fund. Today we even met with the AFL of Massachusetts, who said, what more can I do? What more can I do? Labor has been our partner, our strength. And again, as my sisters and brother have said before us, getting that support, getting that cheering, while we're on the line, really does raise our spirits. we do believe this is union busting 101. I mean, this is certainly, certainly this is a mainly female profession. We think that that's part of it, that, they've decided that this is a good place to try to be union busters. We have filed 9 unfair labor practices, including making unlawful threats against striking nurses, retaliation, discrimination against striking nurses, promises of benefits to non-strikers. And, the thing is, so we've continued to meet with them, intermittently. It's been a struggle to get them to the table, but we're very, very, very close. We both compromised a little bit more. We need to get back in the building. There's our beds up here in New England are full as they are anywhere else. And we need those nurses back working and opening those beds, which because Tenet has closed some of those beds because they don't have the staff. And so what they are saying is, oh, we want to honor the people, the nurses. I think you and I know them as scabs who crossed. We want to honor them. And so when you come back, you won't get your jobs back. You can work, these are nurses who have worked at this hospital for 10, 20, 30, sometimes even, some of them even 40 years. They have dedicated their professional career to this hospital, and they're being told, no, you can pick up what's left over. We're keeping these, non-skilled, not educated in the areas in which they're working. We're going to keep them there, and you have to just pick up what's left over. And these are nurses who have put in their whole career at St. Vincent. So this is really our sticking point right now. And the only word for that is retaliation. And we said, we walked out together, we'll walk back together. And this is a legal strike, and we will get our jobs back. And that's where we are today. And again, we are so grateful for all the support that we've gotten. It's been all over the country and even all over the world. A labor organization in France published an article. I couldn't read the whole thing, of course, but published an article in their journal highlighting our fight. And, nurses and actually anybody in organized labor says their fight is our fight. This is corporate muscle trying to just say, no, we are not going to give you safe working conditions. And we're going to grind you under our heel. And we are saying, no, you're not here. So thank you very much. And thanks for listening. And thanks for all the support that everybody has shown us. It has meant so much to us.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much for being on. Workers' World newspaper has been in continuous circulation since 1959. We are a daily news service, and if you go to workers.org and enter your email address, you can sign up to receive news articles from a revolutionary socialist perspective every day. We have a color print edition every month that can be delivered to your door. Every day and every issue, we cover international news as well as news within the US and its domestic colonies, including news about the struggles that you've heard tonight. We exchange articles with our allies in the movement, independent people's media, and socialist publications around the world. Each week we run our section Tear Down the Walls, which is about the struggle for the abolition of the prison industrial complex, from our inside report of the Attica uprising in 1971 to our weekly coverage of incarcerated workers' struggles today. Workers' World really is an invaluable revolutionary media source. You can subscribe to the Workers' World newspaper and Tear Down the Walls by email at workers.org. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our last 2 speakers. Makasi Motema is the Secretary of the Executive Committee of Workers' World Party. Hello, Makasi.
Hi, Mary. How are you doing?
Less and less of the workers in this country belong to a conventional labor union. There are gig workers, unemployed workers, incarcerated workers, and so on. How can we organize our class when we are so fragmented and unconnected to a typical workplace?
Well, I think that if we look at the problems of workers being divided, we have to think about how to organize, as you said, our entire class. But to look at it as organizing our class into one cohesive unit, into one organization. There are a lot of reasons why union membership has trended downwards. I mean, it's a war by capital against workers, but when you look at these sort of smaller groupings of workers who maybe they're too small to have a union, or they're scattered about. So what we can do for those workers is, if we organize people not on the basis of a specific workplace or on the basis of a specific industry, but just on the fact that they're workers, that can change things. That can allow people to unite on a broader level. So unions are a critical factor of organizing our class, but they need support. The capitalist class is been waging this sort of legal warfare against labor rights. And so there are certain things that unions can't do because the politicians are so owned by capitalists. But when unions go on strike, I mean, you just heard about the nurses. If their community members could go out with them, if they could demonstrate in solidarity with them, if we can get people from multiple industries together, that increases the fighting power of unions. And so the reason we can unite people to fight along the same lines is because ultimately every member of the working class, regardless of what your actual work is, you're facing the same conflict, you're facing the same struggle. And that's the struggle between capitalists and workers. Because capitalists survive by the unpaid wages of workers. You know, they're taking value that you as a worker created, and they're always going to need to steal more and more and more from you, because capitalists are also at war with each other. They're constantly trying to liquidate each other, outcompete each other. And so their profits, as huge as their profits are always at risk. And they're always looking at workers and thinking, how can we steal even more profits? So this is a never-ending battle, right? No matter what gains we make, capitalists are always going to be motivated to roll them back. And they have the means to do that because they control the economy and because they own politicians. There's a politician they don't like, they can buy a new one. So at some point, this conflict has to be resolved. There can't, there's no middle ground here. It has to be resolved by the decisive victory of the working class over the capitalist class. And what that looks like is workers' organizations gaining control of the economy, hurling the capitalist class out of political power. And so you have workers and their chosen representatives in organizations, in control of jobs, in control of housing, in control of healthcare, in control of the state. Once you have that, once you have real workers' power, then you can actually address the issues we're facing. You can fight against an out of control pandemic. Homelessness as a problem will almost cease to exist because there's no housing shortage, of course. There's just, people are just priced out of homes. So if we want to solve the problems that we're facing, we have to understand that there's one root problem, and that's the continued, unending, always escalating exploitation of workers by capitalists. And once we end that, we can actually solve all the consequent problems, all the problems that spiral out of that. And that's why Workers' World Party has been involved in the organization of workers' assemblies, because a workers' assembly is a group of workers getting together. They decide on what their approach is going to be democratically to struggle for to win gains in their workplace, to struggle against their employers, to show solidarity with each other, and that is a form, an organizational form that can build into something far greater, that can actually represent the will of the workers as a whole class and displace the capitalist class. So the shorter answer to your question is that what we need is our class to act as one unit. And so if you want to organize your workplace, please call Workers World. If you want to organize workers, join Workers World, because this is something that we're, this is our focus, and we don't see any way to combat the problems that our society is facing without this unified organization of our class. Thank you.
Thanks, Makasi. That's why I'm a member. Our final speaker for the night, it's my privilege to introduce Larry Holmes, the first Secretary of Workers' World Party. Larry, will you share your thoughts on how we can build on the momentum of all the actions we have heard about tonight and advance toward the goal of a worker-led society?
Yes, comrades, and I want to thank the party's labor fraction for organizing this webinar tonight, and I've enjoyed all of the presentations. They brought so much to the table to learn from and process. Recently, I drafted a document for our internal discussion in Workers' World Party. The main title is Towards a Class-Wide Movement. And I try to deal with how the scientific technological revolution, globalization, the subsequent war on the working class, combined with the limitations of traditional trade unionism and the political orientation of much of the labor leadership, has basically led the working class into a ditch, a very dangerous ditch, like a wall that it can't move beyond. We need revolutionary change, a new working class movement, a working class movement that's going to embrace at least 2/3 of the working class and not less than 9%, which I think is around the statistic, how many workers are in the labor movement today, at least in the private sector. We need a class-wide movement, comrades and friends. What I mean by that is a movement that pulls in all workers, regardless of their circumstances. Sex workers, incarcerated workers, migrant workers, gig workers, Black and Latinx youth who are fighting police in the streets. We need a class-wide movement that has no geographic or organizational boundaries. I try to explain to my comrades and friends that we can no longer look at the labor movement as just organized labor. Well, let's go to the labor movement. Of course, the labor movement is very important, but that's just a limited expression of what's possible and of what is necessary. It is not the end, the beginning and the end of the labor movement. It's just what it is, but it needs to transform in a revolutionary way. Imagine the energy and militancy of, let's say, the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is the 10-year anniversary this month, the last day of September. The Black Lives Matter movement, that is, shut shit down, fighting for justice and an end to police racist terror. Imagine if they were also components of a new class-wide movement. And let me specify, not in some constrained way where they were controlled by moderate labor leaders or politicians. No, we don't need that. In an unconstrained, highly revolutionary, highly political way, unleashed. Imagine if that was part of the labor movement. That's what we have to do. If not, comrades, we're going to be stuck in a very dangerous historic trap, a trap that has us relying on capitalist politicians, not exclusively, but mostly in the Democratic Party. And it is a trap, and unless we break free from it as a class, then there's no way that our movement will grow, because the message that the politicians send us, whatever they're fighting about, the infrastructure building, bill, whatever, is workers don't do anything, leave it to us, and never try to take matters into your hands, because that would mean that we don't have a job, and our job is to supplant you. Until we turn this around, comrades, it's very big. You've heard it before, but I'm underscoring it. There'll never be a workers' movement, much less a revolutionary workers' movement. There's an article on unionizing Amazon this week that came out in Jacobin Mag that's getting a lot of buzz, authored by a labor writer by the name of Eli Rose. And the title of the article is Organizing Amazon is Do or Die for the Labor Movement. The opening paragraph, or at least part of it, is this, quote, failing to unionize Amazon would hasten the US labor movement's decline, period. But that doesn't have to happen. We have a fleeting opportunity to organize Amazon if labor and the left make it an urgent priority. End of sentence, end of quote. Is it a do or die question? Well, there's a simple answer. UPS drivers, who are now organized by the Teamsters, make about $40 an hour on average, plus benefits. Amazon workers and drivers, non-union, they make less than half of that and have no benefits in many instances. And Amazon is so big and it's expanding at such a rate with, 1 million workers in this country, not even counting Amazon workers around the globe, that it's swallowing up other sectors of the economy, logistics, transportation, retail, all on its non-union crusade. So you can see that it's an existential threat to many unions and the entire labor movement. That's one of the reasons why the Teamsters at their conference a few months ago finally decided that they were going to organize Amazon workers. And we're waiting to see if they're serious about that and ready to join that struggle. But that's just economics, comrades. Politically and organizationally, if there is no new class-wide movement, a militant revolutionary movement, a movement led by communists and socialists who are the only forces that can get things done, which is the way we've always organized workers to win victories, when we break away from the capitalist politicians and their parties. If there's no movement to usher in a grassroots uprising of workers, we can't move forward. The working class can't move forward. So that article that paragraph that ends, if labor and the left make it an urgent priority, I interpret that as them saying, build a class-wide movement. That would mean labor and the left making it an urgent priority. What tactics and strategies are necessary? That's a big ongoing discussion that we should engage in immediately, and it's an unending conversation. But politically, comrades, it means that the working class must begin to demand things that are class-wide issues. For example, the unionization of Amazon. That shouldn't be just up to the Amazon workers. Of course, it's first and foremost their responsibility, but that demand to unionize Amazon, truthfully, it shouldn't just be up to the organized labor movement, although that's obvious. It should be a class-wide demand. It's a new way of thinking, but that's the way we have to go. How many of us have marched against various wars, Afghanistan, Iraq? If you go back to my generation, Vietnam. How many of us have marched in support of Cuba, have marched against racist terror, justice for George Floyd? I don't live in Minneapolis. Most of us don't, but we still marched for George Floyd. You know, we don't live in Southeast Asia, but we marched to end the Vietnam War. We don't live in the Middle East, but we marched to end the US military occupation and war against Iraq and other countries. The point I'm making is that you have to look at the workers' struggle the same way. You can't just say, well, it's up to these workers or it's up to that workers, and that's nice. And maybe, you have to get involved in it. It has to be a class-wide struggle. First, that will be symbolic, but ultimately it has to transcend symbolism and it must be substantial. That's the way we're going to win. So looking at the way that the struggle to organize Amazon is, and the comrade gave the report on what's going on in Bessemer, and Chris Smalls was on to talk about what's going on in Staten Island, and we got the Teamsters, and there are other groups, Amazonians United, involved in it. And a lot of these Amazon and Whole Food places, which Amazon owns, they're all organizing committees. Many of them we know about, some of them we won't, and in the struggle we'll find out about all of them. In the next 3 to 6 months, comrades, in my estimation, it's going to be incumbent upon us to help open up a war against Amazon, to organize it, and to make sure that war spreads beyond Amazon. Because while Amazon employs a lot of workers, most workers don't work at Amazon. Gig workers don't work there. Street merchants don't work there. People who work at McDonald's don't work there, and a lot of workers don't work there. If we do that, this war will transform our class, and it will put us on the road to building a class-wide movement instead of the very limited and narrow movement that can't move things forward that we have now. This is going to be an essential step if you're interested in ultimately replacing capitalism with socialism. What I'm describing is going to be an essential step toward revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you to all our panelists tonight on behalf of the Labor Fraction of Workers' World Party. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe, don't fight capitalism alone, and build a workers' world. Thank you. Good night.